Get ready.
I'm Kaz Riley, and this is the Hypno 247 Live Network, and this is Trancing in the Sheets. And when you join this network, you were sent an email, and on that email is a very special and snazzy link that actually, when you click on it, will allow you to get a $200 gift card so that you can use that gift card towards discounts off hotels, car hire, and all kinds of other wonderful things in lots and lots of very interesting and wonderful destinations. So don't forget to go and click on that. Also, if you'd like to know more about how using things like travel cards can help your business, then just put the word solutions in the box below and we'll send some information out to you. There's all different ways that you can use them to help enhance your business. So put the word solutions in and you can find out more. So this is Trancing in the Sheets, and Trancing in the Sheets with me today, I have one of my very best friends in hypnosis. She is also an amazing hypnotist. She's one of the busiest hypnotists in the state of California, has some really wonderful and interesting views about things, is truly a client-based practiced hypnotherapist. And you know, this is what I've really tried to get lots of people that are absolutely walking their talk, and this lady does that in spades. So I am very, very pleased and happy to welcome Gila Zak onto the show today. Thank you, Gila, and thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very, very happy to be here. I'm always happy when I get to see you.
I know. It's we just have such a great time together. We do indeed. So what we're going to speak about specifically today is something that I know you use a lot in your practice. You spoke about at HTL 2018, you did a fantastic talk about this to a packed out room. I was there was standing room only, and it was absolutely fascinating. And I think you really started to open people's minds to some of the ways in which, you know, we kind of classify people, if you like. We like to kind of use all different kinds of personality tests, don't we, within the world of hypnosis. But this one in particular was very insightful. And that is sexual suggestibility or sexual personality, whether people are an E or a P. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so E is considered emotional or intellectual. Mm-hmm. So if I were to say this person falls into the category of an E or an emotional, that means that they're more head-centered. They're locked into their head, they're ruminators, they're head-centered first, heart-centered second. P is for physical, because that person is likely to be heart-centered and body-centric first. Mm-hmm. And what I really love about this particular theory of personality is that it's very different than when someone says, well, I've taken the Myers-Briggs and I'm this. Well, E and P takes into account that we change. Those other personality assessments say this is who you are, and then if you take that suggestion in for your whole life, guess what? 20 years later, you're still calling yourself that when maybe you've changed. But in E and P theory, there's a spectrum that we can move beyond. We are at our core who we are, but depending upon who we're in a relationship with, we're going to behave differently.
Now that's really interesting, isn't it? And of course, we see that, don't we, within our own relationships through our lifetimes, or when we see other people in relationships, that they are very different, actually, according to who's in their life at that time, especially, you know, who their kind of partner is. That is something that we see. But how do you use this? Because I know this is obviously a sexual personality, and one of the things that often therapists will say to me is they're not even comfortable talking about sex with some of their clients, or that clients aren't comfortable talking about sex with them. So this, to actually kind of profile them in this way, how does that help you? And how do you kind of, you know, what would you say to therapists that say they feel uncomfortable about that?
I'd say you need to get some hypnotherapy to get comfortable talking about sex. No. And sexual parts, right?
Absolutely.
Because, you know, it's really important to feel comfortable talking about it, because it's going to come across very obvious if you're not to your client. And what's so important about why E and P plays into the work we do as working with sex issues is because we are expected as a culture to be these sexual beings that are on all the time. If you're a woman and you don't have a high libido, a high sex drive, well, then there's something wrong with you. You must be a prude or you must have issues. If you're a man and you don't want sex all the time, if you want it less than your wife, why, there's something wrong with me? Why does my wife have a higher sex drive than I do? And the reality is that there are two sets of what's considered normal. And about 50% of the population falls into the E, the emotional, intellectual, and about 50% into the P, the physical. And the beautiful thing is that opposites tend to attract. And there's a lot of reasons, that this happens. I would need a lot more time to go into that, but there's a reason why opposites attract. And so we end up with these people that are different than us, but that in and of itself can cause the conflict within the relationship once the honeymoon phase is over. And so, for example, if I'm working with a man who comes in and he says, I think I have a problem with my sex drive. And I'll say, well, how often do you desire sex? And he's like, maybe once a week. And I'm like, okay. And what are you comparing this to? Why do you think it's not normal? Well, I've gone online and I've looked up this, or I'm talking to my friends and they say that, and I'm the only one in my group. And, well, have you been tested by the doctor? Yeah, there's nothing, no problem, no prostate issue, no low T. I go, well, guess what? Welcome to 50% of the population of men who feel exactly the way that you do. This in and of itself can take such pressure off of the man. And then guess what? When you're dealing with an emotional, intellectual, sexual, the minute there's pressure, the sex drive goes down. Any kind of pressure, financial pressure, relationship stress pressure, cultural pressure. So when you take that pressure off, then comes back their natural drive. Consequently, for a woman, if a woman has a low sex drive, she thinks there's something wrong with her. And the truth is that with an emotional, intellectual, sexual, your sex drive is more secular, whereas with the physical, it's just always there. The switch is always on, and it's usually on overdrive.
Do you find with Ps that the kind of, traditionally where people often see their libido and things kind of go down in times of stress? So that could be financial stress, either illness, anything. Do you find with Ps that the opposite happens, that kind of actually goes up? Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because the essential thing to understand with the P, a physical sexual, is that they see the quality of their intimacy and their physical relationship as their fundamental kind of rudder that keeps them flowing steadily in life. So if the world is stressful, they're going to escape into that sexual experience as a way to release the pressure, as a way to feel, oh, okay, I've got some relief. I've come back to my safe place with my partner. I can be sexual and express myself. And in that orgasmic release, they're releasing a lot of the pressure and the stress. So yes, this is true. And that's one of the questions that I ask people when we're doing part of the assessment. Does your sex drive tend to go up or down when you're stressed? And what kind of stress is that? Because that in and of itself, that question will tell me if they're likely to be an E or a P.
So how do you assess if somebody is in fact an E or a P? What kind of process do you take them through?
Well, we're looking to find 4 core traits. And outside of these 4 core traits, we can take a sexual suggestibility quiz. It's a questionnaire. All of the questions are very sexual in nature, which is why you need to be comfortable asking them. And so the suggestibility quiz will tell you how they're behaving in the relationship with the partner they have, but who they really are at their core of the 4 core traits. And the first one is the family dynamic. The secondary caregiver in the family. Were they likely to be physical? Did they touch? Did you cuddle? Did they give you hugs, verbal reassurance and praise? Were they playful, or were they more cold and aloof? Were they more distant, where you knew that secondary caregiver loved you, but they just felt a little awkward showing it? The second core trait is your own relationship history that you've had through time. And I have clients make a relationship history. How long did the relationship last? How intense was it? How passionate was it? Who ended it? And how you felt at the end of the relationship? Were you relieved? Did you intellectualize the grief and sorrow and move on? Or did you have a really hard time letting go? Then the next one is your relationship to your body. How do you feel your emotions? Physicals tend to feel their emotions in their body first, and then they translate into their thoughts and their emotions. E's, the the emotional, intellectual sexuals, they're different. It's all in the head first, and then it translates to the body, which is why E's usually need more foreplay. They need more time to get into that mood and into that rhythm and experience of sex, because they need to get out of their head.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, it's how we respond to rejection. If a physical is rejected, they take it very personally, because in their world, physical contact and love were the same thing. So if you reject them verbally or physically, they take that very, very personally. It is like pain. It'd be no different than poking them with something very sharp or hard. E's are very different. If there's a rejection, they will usually intellectualize it. And it doesn't mean that they won't feel bad and they won't hurt, but it doesn't usually translate to their body, and they're usually able to intellectualize it and move on much quicker than physicals.
Okay, so then how does that translate into, so you have that knowledge about them, you've kind of assessed whether they're an E or a P, and I guess, like you said, it's a spectrum, isn't it? It's not that you're in one camp or the other. It could be that you lean more towards one, and for some things you might be in the other. But how do you use that then to help you with therapy? Because not all the therapy that you do is sexual therapy, is it? A lot of it's anxiety and all the general things that we tend to see as hypnotherapists. So how do you use that information in other aspects of your work?
Well, it translates beautifully across any issue that someone comes in, because generally when it's social anxiety, there's a fear of losing control. And guess what? That's an E. That's an E-sexual. Fear of losing control of my mind, body, or environment. For a P, it's usually a fear of rejection. I'm afraid of how someone's going to judge me or see me, or how I'm going to, present myself out into the world, because they fear rejection.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's social anxiety, we can apply it right there. If it's someone who's looking to get peak performance in a sport, it comes into play, because if you understand if someone's an E and P, more how head-centric or body-centric, you know how to tailor the suggestions to that person in a way that really makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. So, for example, I am an emotional sexual. I'm not high on the spectrum, but I am. So don't tell me what to do. I will reject a direct suggestion. Don't tell me what to do. But if you give me choice that comes within the own spectrum of my process, that I'm going to grasp onto. So whether I'm dealing with peak performance, I'm not going to tell you to X, Y, Z. I'm going to say, let's tailor it in a way that makes sense for you. Mm-hmm. Whereas the opposite is the case for the physicals. If you're dealing with any therapy across the spectrum, you want to be more direct with them, because they're going to feel it in their body first. Mm-hmm.
That's certainly, I know when we spoke about whether or not I would be an E or a P, I think we came to a fairly certain conclusion that I was probably in the P camp rather than the E camp. And that's very right. It's not, maybe no surprise that I am actually so direct, actually. And I do respond very well to direct suggestion, interestingly. So, so I think, it's very important, isn't it, to kind of get a handle on how our clients function. And actually, because sex is such a fundamental part of human life, and our sexuality is such a fundamental part of who we are, I think it makes perfect sense that as therapists, we would have an understanding about each individual client that way, because we have a better understanding about who they are and how they are likely to respond. So it helps to, I guess, tailor the therapy to a client much more effectively than just kind of the kind of one size fits all kind of thing, doesn't it?
Right. And again, why I find this particular theory so incredibly accurate is because it changes with us, right? If you're a dominant P and you're in a relationship with an E, you're going to behave true to your nature, right? To your core traits. But if you were to happen to get into a relationship with another P, and let's just say they're higher than you on the spectrum, maybe they're like an 80%, that's going to trigger your subdominant emotional traits. And you will be the one that is less likely to initiate sex as often, because they're so demanding in that area that it triggers your subdominant traits. And so, with the emotional sexual, it's all about getting them reconnected to their bodies, because they seem to be so disconnected. So if you have two emotionals together in a relationship, you can see how over time they would separate and become these lovely roommates, but there's no passion. There's we need each other. The E's need the P's and the P's need the E's. It's just you know.
That's the balance, isn't it? Absolutely. So I'm guessing whereas with two E's over time that may happen, with two P's, what do you kind of almost get to where things can get too explosive almost, where it's, you know, it's almost too physical, you know, and there's not enough of the emotional stuff going on. Is that what tends to happen, or?
It does, because the physicals will put their bodies out there to protect their emotions, right? It may be uncomfortable to talk about how they feel, or they want to talk about it so much that it scares the other person off from time to time, so that they'll put their bodies out there first. And in the beginning, physicals are going to have some, let's face it, some really hot sex, because they're both such physical feeling. I mean, their vasodilation is more present. So their heat is at the surface of the skin even. Mm-hmm. And it's going to seem like it's just amazing. Like I met my match, I met my soul, my twin flame. But then over time, when you're beyond that honeymoon phase, there's going to be the struggle for dominance, right? Who's going to take the dominant position? Physical sexuals usually prefer dominant sexual positions, right? It even translates into this. And the opposite would be with two E's, in that, you know, there's going to be sex in the beginning because there's chemistry, there's hormones, and there's that drive to create all the bonding hormones that we make. But beyond that, in the honeymoon phase, the two E's are going to be so preoccupied with their work and their hobby and their other stuff that they just drift apart. So that's generally what we see happen. And
when you explain this to people, do they kind of have those aha kind of light bulb moments? Yeah, tell me about those.
They do have. As a matter of fact, I learned this 6 years ago, and I've been with my husband since I was 17, and we're in our early 50s now. And I remember saying, holy shit. Oh, can we say that on your show? Okay.
Of course you can. Of course so. We like on my show. It's me.
Okay, well, holy fuck. It was like, oh my God. The light bulbs were going off, and I remember thinking, if I had known this going into our relationship, if he had known this, we could have avoided the conflict that comes with assuming that the other person's motivations and intentions are the same as ours. And yes, the light bulbs go on. And at the presentation that I did give at HTL, I mean, I was thronged in the hallways. People, I want to know more. How do I know more? How do I know more? And, you know, meeting some people again this year, they're like, I knew their face, but I didn't remember them from well. And they're coming up to me and like, I need to talk to you because what you said changed my relationship. And so it's really an important knowledge, because no matter who you train with, what protocol you use, what technique you use, this just gives you a very deep underlying understanding of their human nature. And who doesn't need to know more of that as a therapist?
Well, absolutely. And, you know, the fact that we are, I mean, it's such a fundamental part of who we are, isn't it? Whether you're in a relationship or not, whether you're sexually active or not, even actually, you know, that won't change as to whether we're fundamentally an E or a P. You know, that's just how that's expressed sexually. But like you say, if this is how we deal with lots of other things, then just having that knowledge of either yourself or your client is actually a very useful thing, isn't it? And, you know, if we can tailor what we do to our clients to that level, you know, and taking those things into account, something that's such a fundamental driver of human nature, then, you know, we're about behavior, aren't we? We're changers of behavior, really. That's what we're looking to do with therapy. So if we understand the driving force behind somebody's behavior, then we're gonna be better at it. It's as simple as that, isn't it?
It is. And I tell people up front when they come in to see me, I'm a behaviorist first and a hypnotist second. You know, hypnotism is my tool that I use to help you. If we need to bring up certain behavior traits, we will. If we need to de-exaggerate others, we will. Because you brought up a good point. Even if someone's not in a relationship, they want to look to why they keep repeating the same patterns, picking the same partners. And a lot of times it's because of the insecurity. But again, I'm looking at the motivation. What is the motivation for the insecurity? And it's going to be different with the E and the P.
Absolutely.
Because they have different core traits of the way that they perceive and see the world.
And also, I guess if you can understand the difference, if you understand, say, myself as a P, understanding that as an E, somebody's just inside their head. And because we assume, don't we, if you're in the same situation as somebody, so I don't know, say you're in a relationship and, I don't know, somebody loses their job or something, and then suddenly there's all this financial stress, and you've got an E and you've got a P, The E is more likely to kind of withdraw. You know, is probably more likely to experience low mood in that, you know, those kinds of things. And then the P's kind of deal with it in a more physical outlet way. So one then's libido goes up, if you like, the other one goes down in the same situation. Right. You know, but then if you have that understanding of, well, that my partner, that's what happens with them when they're stressed, or and vice, whatever that may be, whether you're the E or the P, then that's going to help you to have a better relationship, because it will help you to understand your partner better, rather than just feel rejected or feel pestered. That's the other thing. It's rejected or pestered, really, isn't it, according to where you are?
You put it precisely. And what I really love about this theory is that Dr. Kappas, the man who basically founded this theory, is that behavior is predictable. And if you learn the metric of which to predict the behavior, you know how not to create the behavior in your partner you don't want. And so if you know that every time, you know, you pester your partner and they reject you and then you take it personally, then you realize, oh wait, all I need to do is back away a little bit, give them some space, take the pressure off.
All kinds of stuff happen on this show. It's great.
So, you know, then we know, okay, once I can, you know, stop taking the pressure off, give them some space, they'll come to me, and they will, right? They will come to you. And it's just a wonderful way to understand human behavior, and it applies to everything. Your boss, your neighbor, your coworker, your siblings. Know how to bring out the behavior you want and to not create the behavior you don't.
Well, it helps you to avoid unnecessary conflict. I think there's always some conflicts always necessary in relationships at some level, but this is a kind of a repeated conflict, isn't it? I know one of the things that I see a lot here is people come and say, you know, I feel pestered, you know, I feel pestered to the point, or she doesn't want it, or he doesn't want it. And then when he does eventually, or she does eventually, then I just wonder if they're doing it just to appease me, to make me feel better, and if they really want it at all. So then you get into this situation within relationships where people literally can't do wrong for doing right. If they do, then are they just doing it because the other person wants them to? So then it just gets messier and messier, where if people have this understanding, you know, this is just how I react in these kinds of situations, which is the opposite to the other person, then you come from a place of understanding and care rather than frustration and rejection, which is never, you know, it's not a good place within, especially when there's already something there within a relationship that's causing an issue that's external, like a redundancy or a bereavement or whatever it may be. Yeah, absolutely.
And that is really important to say. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so it's an interesting one. So is there anything else about E's and P's that we should know that would be useful for us to know just in the short time that we've got left?
In the short time that we have left, the biggest thing to know is that the physical, if there is conflict in the relationship, the physical has the ability to shift the dynamic of the relationship faster, because they are usually the one doing the pestering. They're usually the one coming forward. And as soon as they stop coming forward, that E is going to think at first, whew, all right, a relief, I've got some space. But they don't want to lose that P. That P is their other part, their other half. And so once they have that space, they will go looking for that P. And then the P will get what they want, that person coming to them, to where they don't always have to feel like they're the ones initiating. So my biggest piece of advice is, if you feel like you are a physical sexual, you'll know it because you're the one who can't let it go, who's always coming forward, who wants to keep talking, and you're following that E around until the E turns around and says something hurtful, or because what they're trying to do is, you know, protect themselves and create space. And then that P will go away rejected and dejected. But if you can stop that from happening, you just recognize, oh wait, I need to step back for a minute, give them their space, they will come forward. And this is where we as therapists look at all the different aspects of why this would be happening in the first place, of course. It's not just as simple as, you know, these behaviors, but you have to look at everything in the context.
Absolutely. It's another tool that we have that we can use, isn't it? No, absolutely. So where can people find out more about you? I know you have I know you don't do lots of training and things like that. It's You truly are one of the most client-based hypnotherapists I know. And I'm sure there's lots of people that would love to come and have sessions with you. I know you get lots of therapists and therapist kids and all kinds of stuff coming for sessions. You're one of the therapists. So people want more information about what you do and where you work and how you work. Where would they go and look?
Well, primarily at my website. It's quantumwaveshypnotherapy.com. You can search my name, Gilazak, Gila Zak, find me there. I'm in California. I do FaceTime, I do Zoom, I do Skype, I do telephone, in person. And you know, I, as I mentioned to you, I have nothing to sell. I just love to share. And this is something that brings me incredible satisfaction and reward. And I just love it. So yeah, that's where you'll find me.
Yes, and you're exceptionally good at it as well, which is the thing. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming and sharing this. I'm sure that as we move through the episodes of Trancing in the Sheets, that you will be a person that will be requested to come back. I would love to have you back, but I imagine just as it was this time when we were in HTL and people were stopping you and asking you all kinds of questions about your presentation last year, I suspect there'll be more here as well. So thank you so much for being here. And, you know, I love our conversations, of which we have many, but this one in particular has been really interesting.
Well, thank you. It's always a pleasure. I truly respect you and what you're doing for the industry, for the profession. And I wouldn't be here if you were not of the utmost caliber and quality. So
well, that's a high compliment indeed. Thank you very much. So if you've enjoyed today's interview, then please let us know. Please let us know in the comments if you've got any questions that you would like to ask me. One of the things that I get when I'm walking the corridors is I get the words, "Hey Kaz, I can tell you this right." And you can tell me anything. You can ask me anything. Just drop me a line. You can do that on any of the social medias, all of which are at Trancing Sheets. You can do that privately via DM. We will at some point do a question and answer, one of these kind of videos, just solely devoted to your questions and the answers that I give. And of course, we will keep those questions completely anonymous. Also, we have 7 other hosts that are working on the Hypnosis 247 Live Network, one of whom is the amazing Sean Michael Andrews, the world's fastest hypnotist. You should check out his show where he's got all kinds of interesting people, interesting guests covering interesting topics, and that is certainly one not to be missed. So thanks for joining us on Trancing in the Sheets, and I'll see you next time.
Get ready.